G'day there, Signets and Swanlings. 2012 Premiership player Nick Smith here. It's my pleasure, as always, to introduce a bevy of bloods, a fan podcast of the Sydney Swans Football Club, brought to you by Noddy and Stevo, a pair of red and white tragics. So pop on the kettle and settle in as the boys had an in-depth chat about the Swans' last game, the Swans' next game, and a little bit about footy too. This is Nick Smith signing off until next week's episode. But in the meantime, remember, be good to your bloods and they'll be good to you.
Welcome back to a bevy of bloods. My name is Noddy and I'm joined as always by Chris. How you going, mate?
Yep, nervous as hell, mate. I can't sleep. I am freaking out. How you doing there?
Ditto. In this episode number 54, we'll be previewing the enormous prelim final against the Pies this coming Saturday. So fluff up your tail feathers and settle in for a potentially biased yarn about all things to do with our beloved bloods. This Saturday evening, our Sydney Swans will play the Collingwood Magpies at the SCG with first bounce at 4:45pm AEST. All right, mate, let's have a quick recap to set the scene. All right, as we know, Sydney and Collingwood both finished with 16 wins and 6 losses, with only percentage splitting the two teams. As was well documented, we stopped their 11-game win streak in a season which included 11 wins by them, which were by 11 points or less. So they've pretty much become the masters of the close games, with the exception of the Cats qualifying final, although that was 6 points, so you could say that was close as well.
Sure.
The Swans had only lost to Brisbane in the final top 8 that went through to the finals, given that Carlton dropped out in that last week in spectacular fashion. But the Pies themselves, they had lost to Geelong, Brisbane, Richmond, Western Bulldogs, as well as Sydney in season 2022. So, mate, let's look at the finals. We're thick in it. We're in the midst of the finals, and we know that we upset the D's, as we've already done the review episode there in the qualifying final. We got through there, and we got the first week off. But the Pies have had a bit of a harder journey. So, how have the Pies gone?
Yeah, I think the Pies have basically really surprising everyone. I don't think anyone gave them much of a chance against the Cats. I think the general consensus was the Cats should rip them apart, and that absolutely did not happen. The Cats struggled greatly against them. They didn't really know what to do with the fast ball movement. They found it hard to control the game at some points. They fed into the Pies' general plan with getting loose ball on the ground, and then the Pies just started grabbing that and taking off, and then it always seemed like the Cats were kind of on the back foot. But the Cats, in a general sense, they just have star players everywhere, and they eventually muscled it back, playing some more congested football in the middle there, and found a way to kind of claw some control of the game and started to play it a little bit on their way. But the Pies still managed to find different ways to scramble it, get the ball moving fast, and always keeping everyone kind of freaking out and worried. At that last, finished off as an amazing game with Gary Rowan coming through in a final for the first time in his career. So good on him, I guess. But it also came with Taylor Adams also pulling a groin off his bone there.
That looked horrendous, didn't it?
Oh, mate, the way he grabbed it too. And from there, I guess they were really disorganized from the back end there, and they kind of struggled at last 15 minutes or so. So, yeah, a really tough one, I guess, for the Cats across the board. They really had to really push through to get through. And the Pies should hold their head up high. And I think what McRae mentioned was that they shouldn't be sitting down. They shouldn't be worried about that loss, and rightly so. So a big game for the Pies, mate. What did you take away from
what
that?
Did he say? He said they had lost but weren't losers.
They had lost the game, but they hadn't lost the season, I guess, is what
he's got a little bit of Brett Kirk about him, hasn't he? Some of his quotes are a bit out there. Dockers. Okay, so the Dockers were shell-shocked, right? So they themselves, they had to come back from 41 points to beat the Dogs at home. And then, of course, they go to the Cauldron, where, let's face it, there was probably like 80,000 Pies fans and maybe 10,000 Dockers fans. So they're up against it. They're making some simple errors. They didn't make things easy on themselves. And it was that same style, and we're going to go into it in more detail, but it was just pressure, and then often, finding opportunities off the half-back line and going forward. And they've got multiple avenues to goal we'll talk about. So, yeah, I think that, it was only 20 points in the end to the Dockers, but sort of, I think really it sort of flattered. It could have been more, I think. Look, much like our rise from 16th to 6th from 2020 to 2021, the Pies obviously are riding very high on having finished 17th last year to finish 4th at the end of the home and away. There's all sorts of stats coming out, no one lower than 13th the year before has won a grand final. There's a lot of preemptive media coming out of Victoria, I think, about the Pies and how it's destiny. But, they've got this weekend to get through first. So why don't we jump into that, mate? Oh, sorry, I'll just quickly, if we look at our respective last 5 games each, we are, of course, 5 wins, 0 losses, including the D's qualifying final win. And the Pies are 3 wins, which is Melbourne, Carlton and Fremantle, and 2 losses, Sydney and Geelong in there. So, that's a bit of a barometer on form, but that's not to say that they're not playing good footy, because they are. They're in it, and their numbers will show that.
Yeah,
All right, mate,
and just on that Dockers game there, mate, like the whole. We're going to talk about what the crowd means for us at the SCG, and we're going to go down there in a little bit. But by goodness hell, man, like 90,000+ Pie supporters would freak anyone out, and I dare say the Dockers had moments there when they had opportunities, but that they just knocked them out of it entirely. The fan base over there is insane, numerous and belligerent. We'll get into it, mate, but I think that was an enormous factor of all of it.
I mean, even the game the weekend before, I mean, Geelong versus Collingwood, it was meant to be a Geelong home game. But I mean, look, there were plenty of cats there, and there was a fair bit of vocal exercises both ways. But you can't help but feel that when it's at the MCG and Collingwood's in the mix, that they're a bit louder, aren't they? So
the biggest club in the comp, I guess. So they have the fan base to do it.
That's it, mate. All right, well, let's have a look at both teams' strengths and weaknesses. We're going to have a bit of a rolling conversation about what makes the Pies good, what makes us good, what makes them a little bit not so good, and likewise for us. But we're going to probably focus on the strengths here, because we're positive here in this podcast. So I'll just kick off and say, look, starting 22 players that would otherwise be in the team but are unavailable. Obviously, Taylor Adams, you've touched on that horrendous groin injury, probably came back a little bit undercooked. And then Brodie Grundy obviously has had that season-ending ankle injury. Darcy Moore and Jordan Ngoe, I think I read Darcy Moore played under duress last week. It didn't look like it. It looked like he
looked like he was perfectly fine.
He looked like he was
one of the more healthy players on the field, right?
Exactly. And that amazing mane of hair with that ridiculous little rubber band thing. But anyway, so no judgment there. I know our Rowie wears that, so go Rowie. And Jordan Ngoe, his shoulder is fine, and they've been listed as ready to play. So we'll start off there. All right, mate. What do we make of the Pies game? How do they play, and what do they do well?
Look, what they do well is they get lots of pressure where the pressure needs to be applied. So if that pressure's in the inside 50, they'll apply the pressure on the inside 50. If the pressure, if that gets released a little bit and their opposition is looking to get some gain down the line, down the center, on the other wing, they find a way to get pressure where that needs to be applied. So they take people there, they get the right people. If not, they don't man up necessarily, but they stop you from then being able to move the ball and present it forward a bit further. And then from then on, hopefully a turnover, and then that's when they go again, when they just go hammer and tong. Was that all duck, no dinner, whatever the hell that means, that's what they feed into. So they are 100% a hard pressure, go fast forward team, and they've got excellent pressure around the ball. And then when you've got a couple of really beautiful users of the football, like the Dacos, Nick Dacos, and Pendlebury, who's got the opportunity to just break a game open with a couple of kicks here and there, or just a perfect handball. It's a really, really good setup that they've got, and it's becoming more and more as you see more examples of it in high pressure situations against very good competition, against the Cats, for an example, you start to really appreciate it. So, look, they've got some pretty good statistics across the board against us as well. So I don't see them. I guess I see them as being a very similar team to us, although I suspect that we've got more speeds where we can actually slow down, control a game, go congested, and find a way to what do you call it? Drag a goal out of the game, drag away to slowly move ourselves into positioning and get a shot at goal. Whereas they'd be expected just to churn it around as fast as they can. What about you, mate? What's your initial thought on how they play?
Yeah, no, I think you've got it there, mate. It's sort of been the story of the year, and to a large extent our year. I think it's that tackle pressure, forcing a turnover or an intercept, and then you see it time and time again, like Darcy Moore creating these, attacking chains out of the defensive 50. And we came across an interesting stat. So defensive chains launched from the Magpies D50, 50% of them will become inside 50. Now, that doesn't sound much on its own, but when you look at the AFL average being 21%, you can see that when they are brave and attack off their D50, 50% of that'll go inside. And then when we dig a bit further, as we've looked at the past 5 games, we're looking at their scores here from round 21 through to the semi-final. Their scores have been 15-6, 7-8, 11-9, 10-12, and 11 goals, 13 behinds respectively. So varying accuracy just on its own in terms of conversion to goal. But if we look at the corresponding inside 50s, we've got 41, 52, 44, 56, 56. So within a range, obviously 40 on the lower end. But what that means is, they're scoring a pretty high percent for every time they go in, ranging from lowest 29% to highest 51%. So I think that we've touched on this year, and I know last year, if you're getting 30 to 40% goals from your inside 50s, then you're a very good attacking team, or a lethal attacking team with the ability to hurt teams, especially on the turnover.
And part of that is, if you imagine, as you mentioned, the inside 50s there, our inside 50s are kind of driven off pressure from the center, push it into our inside 50. They might rebound that just outside the center, and then we continually apply pressure between the wings and the centers and just keep going forward, and then don't let it go too far into our defense. Whereas for them, they might concede a lot of distance to roll back into their defensive line, and then, as you mentioned there, launch defensive chain from D50. 50% of them will come inside 50s. They'll launch forward quickly and go all the way with the game. And there was a couple of great moments, as you mentioned there, with Darcy Moore. That last game was an amazing channel of events where they took it from that defensive pocket all the way straight down the center. And then I can't remember who goaled it. I think it might have been Ginnivan or something. So we do have, although we might have similar statistics of our inside 50s just statically, how they are churned through are so different. We're very different in that space.
They're not really known for their contested possession. This is an interesting one. So prior to the semi-final, the Magpies had lost the contested possession count in the last 9 matches by an average of 22 a game. That's substantial. I think if you're losing anything more than 15, differential of 15, I think that can have an effect over the course of a game. But what we're seeing here is, even if they're not winning the contest, they're able to punish teams or keeping games from the pressure, off the back of their pressure, and then launching out of either the halfback or even attacking midfield chains as well. They've ranked 5th in scores from attacking midfield chains, averaging 29, almost 30 points a game. So they can be dangerous off the halfback. They can be dangerous through the middle, but it's off the back of their tackle pressure. And they've got creators, and as you've already spoken about, Pendlebury and Dacos, but yeah, they've got Chris. I mean, we're going to go through some of the players in a minute, so we'll wait for that. But another point to make, I think, is they're really quite similar to us, in terms of even their structure of their list or their best 22. They've got 7 players under that 50 games threshold. I would argue more of a mix of role players, a few genuine A graders in there already at a young age. But we're looking at is it Lockie Ash or Ash Lachlan? It's one. I think it's Lachlan Ash, isn't it?
What is it again? That's a great point.
What's the gent's name? I don't want to get it wrong.
We've got it right here.
Ash Johnson.
Ash Johnson.
There's not Lockie in there anyway. All right, so Ash Johnson, Trent Bianco, Josh Carmichael, although he was Medisub last week, Nick Dacos, Jack Ginnivan, Bo McCreary, and Nathan Murphy. And of course, Isaac Quainer is 22, but he's played 60 games. And if you look at us, I'll just jump ahead to us. We've also got 7 players under 22 around that 50 games mark. We've got Blakey, although on 76, Rowie on 67, and then we've got Errol, Juzzy, Logan, Chad, and Dill Stevens. So we've got a similar amount of inexperienced but dangerous young players. And if we jump ahead and look at their averages, because it's always about averages here, the average games that they've played is 108, and we're 117, probably bumped up a little bit by the likes of Buddy, Parker, and you probably put Rampy in there as well. Even Reedy has played a couple. Average age is about the same, 25 in the end. But obviously, we've got Buddy 35. They've got Pendles, who's 35 or 34. So it's remarkably similar looking numbers that we've come across in preparing for this episode. So if we look at our own game, which we've sort of fleshed out, each week of this podcast. We don't need to go into much detail, but I think even your average Swans fan would be able to say that we've got a great pressure game, we've got really really good kickers, and we've got lots of avenues to goal, and that's kind of been plus our two-way running and our hard work. That's kind of been our game this year. Would you add anything to that?
I think that our coach, we're coached very well in that we're able to transition into different game styles throughout the game.
We can adapt, yeah.
Yeah, we're very adaptable, and you'll see us game to game. We've adjusted as we've needed to. There's been some circumstances where we've adjusted mid-game, but for the most part, we do have a plan, and we are able to stick to it. And that's been a second half of the year kind of transition, maybe a little bit earlier than that. But it's all, I guess it all comes down to having some very mature young guys, knowing what their role is and playing that role and just playing it well. So we don't need a whole bunch of players to, chalk up massive stats necessarily. But, as we've gone through this season and we've done a lot of ABOB medal presentations every single week, we've read out quite a few different names along the way, and some of them being quite young, especially in the honourable mentions. We've had a pretty wide breadth of players that have been involved all the way through. So I think it kind of, to me, a big differentiator between what are the two teams' strength is just our ability to change the game style as we need to. It kind of feels like Collingwood was less so, although I think that they're going to, they're going to be found out, I guess, at some point. But if they're smart about it, they'll see this coming as well. So they'll find a way to kind of avoid some of that.
I haven't got our numbers at hand, but I think I remember them from a previous episode, so I'll call on them in a moment. But we looked at home and away against averages and for averages, as opposed to finals against averages and for averages. And for Collingwood, during the season, they conceded about 12 goals a game and 10 behinds a game, so 80 points. And they scored themselves about 12 goals a game and 11 behinds a game, and scored about 84 points. So you can see when we go back to that 11 wins at 11 points or less, you can see that they were not necessarily high scoring, but always in the mix and always usually on the winning side of things. And when you come to finals, it's pretty similar. I won't go through it, but basically they're averaging about 75 points for and conceding 69 points. So it's a little less.
And a reduction there is expected for finals football. Yeah, that's what you expect to see.
Yeah. Over the course of the season, though, their average winning margin is 13, and the average losing margin is 23. So when they win, it's close. When they lose, there's usually 3 or 4 goals in it. Over the course of the game, that could be within one quarter or the whole game. But yeah, look, it sort of paints a picture of of it going to be probably a pretty close game in terms of how they play game styles and strengths and weaknesses. And of course, we'll touch on head-to-head and form, head-to-head and track record and stuff like that a bit later on. But I will round out this section here and just say I started with their starting 22 unavailable. On our side, obviously, we've got Joey with the Hemi, who hopefully he's progressing well. And then, of course, Laddams, who's got the 2-game suspension for that. Another brain fade there most recently in the VFL, as we know. They're probably the 2 guys most likely who may be in the team if they were fit and not suspended. So
and just like on the Pie side as well, they've got the 2 major clearance getters in Grundy and Adams are out as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say that those 2 are like for like, because I'd say that Grundy and Adams are closer to their best than perhaps JPK is in terms of age-wise, but for sure Laddams could have had a big impact as well if he was around. So it's going to be a tough one. I think another one that I was actually going to point out too, Noddy, was they kind of have similar pieces in different places, right? So they have like a solid defender. They've got their veteran centerman looking at moving the ball, although Parker and Pendlebury are very different in players, like totally, in fact, opposite type of players. But one thing that they don't have is any kind of they don't have like a particularly tall presence or that traditional big forward role going off. They kind of do rely on a few more mid-sized and slightly smaller than mid-sized forwards on their end. So applying pressure and getting around the ball a lot faster and moving longer, bigger leads, trying to drag off their man in order to make the most of those continual inside 50s that they do get. So that if anything, I actually see posing a bit of a problem is their forwards against our backs to kind of, the speed and movement that they can go. Our backs, Tommy, although just as fast as Cozzy Pickett apparently, and Paddy and Rampy, those gentlemen aren't necessarily known for leg speed, but having said that, not too many defenders are. They're normally positional guys, so.
Why don't we? It sounds like you've kicked off. So why don't we carry on? We're going to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is a bit of a segment we're toying with, maybe doing officially next year. But basically, we're looking at likely teams and danger players. So we probably won't touch on the Swannies too much because we assume that we'll be pretty close to rolling on. Obviously, Horses said Ollie's good to go, Buddy's feeling good. And then I think you said there was a comment on Logan.
I think one of the questions that they had from the media was, is Logan an in, guaranteed in? And Horse, doing what Horse does, putting ice on that fire, just refusing to answer anything clearly. But he
neither yayed it or nayed it. It's like
you can tell one of us is the dad.
Yeah, I'll take that one.
He did mention it all depended on the matchup. I don't see why, but yeah.
Let's look at the matchup. Okay, what we've done here is we've taken the Pies team that took on the Dockers, which I think was pretty close to the previous team against the Cats, obviously, apart from Taylor Adams. Trent Bianco came in for him, and then Josh Carmichael came on to Medisub. So we've listed them out one by one. I reckon it's worthwhile doing it because it's a bloody prelim preview, so why not? So let's look at their defenders. They got 7, and we'll refer back to ours when go back to your point saying that they're pretty similar types that we've got going. So I'll just read them out and then I'll throw over to you for some general comments, okay? Darcy Moore.
Yep, one of the top 3 defenders in the game. Amazing 101, kicks off rebounds like a veteran. Quick off the ball, just perfect. Just an excellent defender.
I mean, he's a giant. He's like 200 centimeters plus and he can sprint like Buddy could in the prime of his career. Yep. So, wonderful player for them.
Great hair.
What a head of hair.
Yeah.
He seems like a genuinely pretty decent bloke as well. So
he does, yeah.
Give him that. All right, Jeremy Howe, Mr. Spectacular, amazing overhead mark. Obviously, he's sort of, I guess he's like a third tall though. He's kind of like rampy in a sense, although a bit more Blakey in that he can get up and really take a screamer. So
yeah, he's got that athletic ability to be able to get up if he has. Obviously, he's won how many cars over his years for mark of the year. So,
Oh god,
and he's seemingly finding another gear. He's just still just fantastic back there. Good veteran presence.
Yeah, definitely. And I did say like Rampy. I misspoke. Braden Maynard, who I think is probably I think is Collingwood's most important player. I think he is really their Rampy. And if you think about Rampy over the past few years for us, even this year, even though he was a bit off earlier in the year, but came home strong, the one percenters that this guy does is just awe-inspiring. Like, he is tough as nails. He'll run 50 meters to get a fingertip on it, but at the same time he's got a deft left kick, and he can create off the halfback as well. So yeah, I mean,
what do you say?
Do you rate him? I mean, you rate
massively.
him.
I'm actually a massive Maynard fan. I think he's a great player. It's a scary matchup as well, because you can sit off a couple of different guys and get around, and when he tackles to hurt. Like, he's a good finals player for that reason. I think he's a very, 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 very important player to them in this finals push. So I'm not, like, it's not nothing that you can kind of squash his impact, because he plays off someone. But
who do you reckon he takes?
Because
I think Darcy Moore would probably get Buddy, right? And then Howe would probably take Heaney, because they're both like freaks in the air and good on ground. But like, who does Maynard get? So
Logan, I'd say, or the other big,
or maybe Reedy. But then they've got Nathan Murphy, who's a role-playing third tall. So it's going to be interesting. But then, of course, they're distributors off the halfback. They've got some quality young players coming through: Isaac Quainer, Nick Dacos, and John Noble. So
Quainer, I think, is really, really fantastic. He's got a very underrated role as well. He does quite a lot. He puts a lot of pressure on. He gets moving quickly. He puts himself he takes the ball in really dangerous areas and still finds a way to sometimes get out. So he shows a lot of poise for someone so young.
And he was, of course, one of the three players from Collingwood that made it into the 22 under 22. Quainer, Ginnivan, and the legend Nick Dacos.
The legend that's 1 year in, absolutely,
1 year in,
mate. Look, what do we say about Nick Dacos though? Like, in the last two games, the last two finals, he's been just phenomenal. But it just goes, watching those games again last night, like I did, it just reminded me of how good of a job that the Clamps did on him. So just to basically just shut him down entirely, and I had to entirely move him off and let him play in a different role. So for certain that Collingwood is playing Dacos in a different position this week. And that's going to happen. So don't be surprised that as soon as they go to set up, you see Dacos on the wing or something, just to kind of give it a bit of a different look, or maybe go a half forward or something, or just start in the center. Because I don't see, they're not dumb enough to just apply the exact same thing and think they're going to get away with it. I think Ryan Clark, the Clamps man himself, has shown consistently that he's able to shut players down, shut Nick Dacos down pretty convincingly. So what do you think, Noddy? Do you think we just lay on him again?
Yeah, I think they'll probably start there, and unless they want to start him out of the centre square, in which case then Clark will just go on whoever's either probably Noble or Quainer, or maybe even Maynard. But I kind of see Quainer and Papley matching up. I see that maybe happening. But it's going to be interesting, because it's they're us scoring is obviously vitally important, but their back seven, their back six, as we've already talked about, that's really the driving force to their attacking. I know that sounds like a cliche, but just with the way that they play, the way that they generate chances off the back defensive 50. So our forward, our tackle pressure inside our own 50, and then forcing turnovers is going to have to be like the best we've done all year, I think. So, and that's with the likes of with Hayward, who else has been contributing really, really well lately. I mean, even Logan, to an extent, he really puts on really good forward pressure there. Of course, Buddy likes a good lineup tackle.
Man.
So, going to be interesting. But if we roll into the midfield, this is where there's similarities, but probably a little bit different. And I think this is where the bulk of their experience comes through, more so than us. So a lineup. So we are Hickey, Parker, Mills, Warner, Rowbottom, McInerney, Goulden, and Stevens in the mix. And obviously those players can come in and out and play other roles. Ollie could go into the midfield at different points. So there's a bit of flexibility there. Obviously, Heaney can drop out of the forwards and help out there as well. But this is our main midfield unit. And then when we go over and look at their side, I'll just rattle them off, mate. Darcy Cameron, ex-Swan. Scott Pendlebury, Josh Dacos, Steele Sidebottom, Jordan De Goey, Jack Crisp, Patrick Lipinski, and Trent Bianco as that interchange substitute midfielder, can play a bit of a role himself. But where do we start there? So I think they've got more senior players.
Yeah, and look at the first two straight off the bat, Pendlebury and Sidebottom. You've heard those names for a long time. Veterans. Still, Sidebottom has not stopped running since the day he joined the AFL. He's gets around, uses the ball amazingly, always available in support. He kind of feels similar to like a Mills in that way. He's always around in the right position, getting a touch on the ball to kind of propel it. And then Pendlebury, what do I say apart from the fact that he's an absolute champion of the game?
He's quite amazing, isn't he? They always talk about his basketball background, but he really is a one-touch player. And you see the handballs out of pressure, out of the contest he does, and you think this guy's got an extra set of eyes. But
he just manages to get that handball out or just find extra space. He's got a step that no one really knows how to read after all these years. So
he goes the other way, doesn't he? And they can't predict it.
Those two kind of tier one in terms of veteran ability. And then you look at the next two that I kind of put in the next camp would be De Goey and Crisp. Both similar center clearance guys, put on good tackle pressure themselves. Get some meters, can go up and kick a goal or two.
So Jordan De Goey didn't play in the round 22 game against us.
No, he didn't. But that was because of a tight hammy from memory or something like that.
Yeah, we might be a misdemeanor. We might find out there was something else that happened next year. But
we'll find out
in due course. But they also had 5 to 7 players under the weather from their flu attack that week. So there's a lot of banter going across socials. But I think probably I don't know, Parker on Pendles or Parker on De Goey and Mills Mills on those guys.
I'd say Rowie on De Goey just because
Rowie on De Goey because it's
Rowie on De Goey. Rowie on De Goey. I think just the
James
tackles.
De Rowie on Jordan De Goey.
Yeah, it all comes down to how he's progressing. Like because he's going to be playing, and you need that sweeper in the mids to control it, basically, make him turn left or right, let him think about the wing or out to the pockets rather than going straight up the center. So you've even got someone like Millsy who kind of hangs out in that positioning sometimes as well to be that last man out of the center clearance. Maybe he's also one that just kind of playing a bit of a role as like just a sweeper generally. So you're looking at Rowie, Mills, I think, to kind of find a way to control that burst out of the middle. When they do get it, because when they do get moving, they're tough guys to tackle, mate. They're really tough.
Let's hope Warner can bring some heat this time, and obviously he's had by his own now lofty standards of this year, he's had a few quiet weeks, but still definitely contributing 20 plus disposals, etc. So no complaints there. Just hoping he can sort of take the game, and just sort of run with it, like in the way that Jordan De Goey can. So it is, as you're saying, it's quite important to keep tabs on him because he can really blow a game open. And he was the player that was missing when we won by 27, and he had been at that point averaging 2 or 3 goals a game. So that you could say that he was the difference that day. But there's a lot of ifs in that sort of hypothetical.
Yeah, but I think we controlled the game around the whole ground.
That run that Jack Crisp did to beat Frederick.
I did. I thought Frederick was fast, and he is fast, but that is ridiculous.
Chris smoked him. That was crazy. I was like, I had no idea he was that fast. So that's another frightening prospect.
So you're looking at Blake. If that happens, I think maybe Blakey's got him for speed, but still Ollie as well, But Chris is also a big fella. He's not small. I wouldn't say he's a big fella, but he's a decent sized guy. So it's not a cheap run with him. Whoever runs with him and whoever's kind of got the role of matching up with him, you have to get a hand on the guy because if, as we saw against the game in the Dockers, if he gets going, then he's going to be hard to stop. So,
And
and he goes all the way. He can kick a goal. So,
and obviously on the wing, they're probably going to run with Dacos, maybe Lipinski there, who the Pies fans will tell you has been the steal of the trade season. But Josh Dacos, much like his younger brother, can really turn a game just in a moment. On his freakish ability, so he's one that we hope the likes of Juzzy and Dill, if they're patrolling the wings as we think they will, just keep him busy, keep him running, and hopefully keep him out of the game. But
and the way that they've been playing too, those two, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to. So, like I said about Juzzy in the last game, he had a tough gig, man. He was up against some pretty incredible wingers himself, and he was playing a very hard defensive role, and he was banged down in pressure as a result of it. So it's going to be similar with him this week. Whoever he matches up with, Dacos presumably, he's going to be having to run with him all the way through and just basically kind of tag the guy because he, as you said, he can rip a game open as well. So it's going to be weird.
Definitely. And so if we move over to the forwards, I think you said earlier that they don't have too much height in the forward line. And I think you're right. Like they don't have that sort of stationary full forward who's there. It's more of they've got a bit of a rolling structure between Darcy Cameron and Mason Cox. And obviously they chop each other out there. And, they're both, you could say pure rucks, even though Mason Cox has played more forward than ruck. He is obviously that gigantic figure in the forward line, and that we certainly can't match for height, as you've already said. So, he doesn't have to do too much to have, a game-changing impact, as we saw a couple of years ago against the Tigers, and as we've seen recently. He can really, really steal the limelight.
He plays better the bigger the game is. I don't know what it is. He's actually a bit of a half a smoky for me, just in terms of he's a hard matchup. He's a big unit.
Who do you put on him?
I probably think Paddy, maybe.
Paddy, yeah.
Paddy, big body, get around.
I mean, Rampy
overhead
gives up a fair few, maybe 20, almost 20 centimeters. So
like at 2 meters, you never know. Mason Cox is infinite size, like he's a big fellow. So I dare say he's a bit of a tough one.
Yeah, Iron McCartan, I think there on him, and then from there, there's a bit of a drop. We can cover these guys for height, as you said. Myercheck and Ash Johnson, they're their next talls. We could cover with Rampy and even Foxy. He would be able to do a job there. I mean, he could go tall or small, but Will Hoskin-Elliott, he's sort of in that sort of Heaney Haywood sort of hybrid third tall role himself, and then there's smalls, obviously McCreary, Jamie Elliott, and Jack Ginnivan, Guinea. So
what of those two, mate? Like Jamie Elliott, Jack Ginnivan. I mean, who do you put on them? Like, because they're kind of a bit of an obscure play in that they don't have that traditional small forward crumbing role. They can get up a little bit and they take big leads and they're willing to kick it out from outside 50, although they never make it. But they're trying to get the ball inside their 50 as much as they can. So they do require someone who's going to be able to run with them all the way.
I mean, this is where I think I've already said Fox. It's like I'd probably entrust Fox on every single player. But Jamie Elliott, he's sort of a bit like our Papley. He can play that. He can go into the midfield. He can lead like a centre half forward, and he can go right in the goal square and just keep a defender out of it because he's dangerous in the air and he's dangerous around ground. Obviously, Jack Ginnivan, the much maligned, much spoken about for various reasons this year. He is obviously a fantastic young player for them, very important to their cause. He's kicked almost 40 goals. So that's somewhere between Papley and Heaney for us in terms of importance, scoreboard importance. So even Beau McCreary, he's someone you don't want to let go because he's incredibly strong, incredibly fast. He's one of their sort of pressure forwards as well, but he can get on the end of a couple of snags too. So
Yeah.
they really are
He's
quite
a tough
dangerous.
matchup, I think.
Yeah, he is. So
like
maybe
Jenny Ellivet, you could put even like a Lloydie on him or something.
Lloyd or Ollie, I think.
Yeah,
But
Ginnivan, same, one of those two.
one of those two. Yeah.
Yeah, the Tours, I think they sort themselves out, depending on the matchup. But Bo McCready, although I wouldn't necessarily say that his impact in games is huge, he's a very good he's a good matchup, and he's a strong boy, so you can get some ball and get it moving.
I think I heard that he's I think he, if not the most, he's certainly in the top 2 or 3 for the most they can bench. I think I heard that. Like, so he's like a pretty strong unit, and we've got a good mate of mine is a Pies fan, obviously, and going through the squad in the lead up to this and just throughout the course of the season, yeah, he's got nothing but good things to say about Bo McCreary. So he's a real important player for them. So yeah, look, okay, mate, we've done the whole team, and I'm sure we've missed a few things. We made notes for every player, and we didn't read any of them. I love that. It's shows that we've got a good read on the squad. We're going with the gut, but yeah, look, I think when you go through it line by line, you can see it's going to be a pretty even contest, and they've got dangerous players in every unit.
I mean, we got a couple of good fans of the potty that have reached out and straight off the bat have mentioned that De Goey, if you can control De Goey, you can practically control the game.
Yeah,
has been their response, and I don't disagree. He's obviously killing it in the coaches' votes and on the scoreboard and clearances and everything. So, but but they also have we got to be sensible with this. They also have other avenues to move the ball to get clearances. Crisp is unbelievably not underrated. He's an unbelievable player. So you got a couple of them, and just the ball movement that they've got across the board there. It's a tough one. Who do you see then as our danger player there, Noddy? Who do you see that someone from our side that could probably maybe break the game open or make a big impact from the beginning?
Well, I'm just sort of going to go with tried and tested. I think Parks is going to be that wall for us there, and Mills obviously hopefully is that link player, and then I'm hoping Warner can sort of come out and get us through. But I mean, Ollie was looking incredible in that D's game. He was really the one that gave us that drive off that halfback and the one that sort of was looking most dangerous. But we've got players everywhere. It's just about who's going to step up. But it's not about like needing to steal the limelight. We're going to talk through some of some horse quotes, and it's really it's that old cliche. It's just about playing the roles. But I don't know, mate. I'm hoping obviously Stephen May comprehensively beat Buddy, but you'd have to say that although Moore and Howe are in that vein, they probably don't have as good as defensive capabilities as Stephen May. Certainly intercepting for sure. Yep. I mean, Jeremy Howe can do that with his eyes closed, as can Darcy Moore. But can they stick to him? Can they get under his skin like he did with Buddy? It's going to be very interesting, I think. But
I can see Buddy just making a point this week. He got called out by basically every single analyst on every single channel, and there was quite a few that was still defending him, saying he took the impact away, and there was articles written about what he'd done to like take May out of the game, and all of this is real. But at the same time, I guess what Buddy's hearing is, you're weak, you're feeble. You're too old to play finals football, and we all know what Buddy's like. He's going to go out there absolutely screaming to get the ball, looking to hurt people. He knows how finals football is played better than most, better than anyone really. So I'd like to see him, get a few touches of the ball early, and just maybe score one quick. And just get them thinking that it's not an easy task to control the big Budster. It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one for him, and I have to put a lot of focus into him, and that's going to release some of the other players to get some more possession, and like Logan to find some more ways to get the goal.
I mean, Heaney obviously copped that elbow early from May, and I'm convinced he was pretty KO'd for most of that game. He's had a couple of weeks to respond. I mean, like nothing was reported, but that was just my own personal feeling.
Dr. Noddy
Dr.
approach
Noddy,
to
yeah. But so I guess we're all waiting, hoping that Heaney can come out and do what he's capable of doing. As is Papley, Reid on his day. We're just as dangerous line by line as them. I just think that we've got more of our younger players in the critical line, as in the midfield. So it's whether or not we can go with their more established, more senior players, like we've called out Pendlebury, Sidebottom, Crisp. But I think we're there. I think we can do it. We certainly can do it. And
I totally agree with everything you said. I think you're bang on. I think we've got the talent. We know we can, but there's probably a couple of talented bits in some matchups and some more veterans in some certain matchups that are just a bit scary. But I'm touching wood, but I'm insanely confident. I think we've got a really good unit. We're going to touch on a couple of reasons why we've got a good chance and why
you're
not.
Insanely confident. Okay,
I'm confident. Good. I'm feeling good about what's happening. I was freaking out during the week, and I still am, and I won't sleep tonight because I've just mentioned these things now. But I'm very confident with the way the team's playing. I'm really happy with the setup. I think we've primed up perfectly, moved into the right spot. Now we're going to watch two teams play really exciting football, like smash each other around the park at a sold-out SCG for a prelim. I mean, we're super lucky to get this happening, but
definitely
it's going to be it's going to be hearts out for some amount of it. It's going to be a lot of sleepless nights.
All right, mate. Well, let's carry those vibes over into a bit of a nerdy section here. It's Battle of the Birds. We look at head-to-head in our last game. So a few numbers going to run around here. We're just going to paint a picture of how the two clubs have come up against each other in the recent history. So apart from the COVID-affected 2019, which was at the Gabba in Brisbane, where Collingwood beat us by 9, the Swans have played Collingwood in Sydney since 2013, and that includes 2013, 2014 at Homebush. So from 2015 to 2022, we've played them at only the SCG, apart from the Gabba during COVID. That's my first point.
Yeah.
So of those 7 games played at the SCG between 2015 and 2022, the Swans have won 5 and Collingwood have won 2. Those 2 wins of Collingwood was in 2019 by 7 points and 2017 by 1 point. And if you probably recall, I think Swans fans will remember, there was a period of time where there were like really close games between the Swans and the Pies. There was like 3 years in a row. It was 2017, 2018, 2019, and we can throw the numbers up on a post later, but I think you all remember them. But if you think about it, that was a long time ago in footy, and the Pies still had the likes of Treloar, Main, Greenwood, Phillips, Beams, Stevenson, Aish, Ben Reid, not Sam Reid, Roughhead, all since transferred, retired, or
Tell
delisted.
Darcy.
Yeah, tell Darcy that. So, look, what I want to say is the Collingwood can win at the SCG, but it's been a while since they have. If we look at the last 2 games at the SCG, the Swans have won by 27 points and 30 points, and that's last year and this year, respectively. So, under the current structure of the Pies, we've had their measure at the SCG. But of course, all this means nothing come game day. What we're doing here is just looking at the head-to-head, looking at some numbers. We're trying to find any omen we can here, mate.
Yeah, and I totally understand why it's a tricky one, of course, because as you mentioned, the teams looked very different alongside, and
we did too.
And we did, and absolutely, both teams have a totally different style of play. So we're looking at what seems like the beginning of 2 eras of teams with a good mixture of veterans and young players and young talent and touted young talent with good coaching. So it's a really interesting part that we're in, and it just kind of goes to show, as you're saying those numbers about how close the games can be. This is the competition, isn't it? Like it's a tight competition. It's regardless of the teams you have, the players are at. If you're in the mix, it's a tough grind. You don't get any cheap games, rarely anyway.
Yeah, and we'll just look at the last game. round 22 this year. We beat them by 27 at the SCG. A couple of those moments that'll stick out in your minds we did on the potty. Rampy's defensive effort on my check.
Oh, incredible.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
And then Buddy's one-handed goal. Rampy scored a goal that game as well. How can we forget that?
That's right. Yeah.
So it was a close game, but there were a few moments that and I think this sort of goes to what we're talking about. Like it's going to be another tight affair. As we've already said, Pies fans will be very quick to point out that they had 5 to 7 players out. Maybe they had players playing under duress. They were affected by flu and other such.
I thought duress was when you didn't want to play.
I thought it was when you were taken hostage by a terrorist.
Yeah, maybe it's both.
I'm confusing.
Well, I don't really know. I think
they said it was the
we're not
lost
saying that it's not terrorists, but we're saying we've not been confirmed as yet.
Exactly. We're saying Collingwood fans are terrible. That's my second dad joke of the night. They were saying it was the loss they needed to have. They couldn't just keep on winning, right? That's what you tell yourself when you go on 11 game win streak and then you lose the 12th one. You go, oh well, we couldn't just do it. We just couldn't keep winning. So you have to.
Why not at 7? Why 12?
Yeah.
But yeah. It's a bit of a cop out thing, but it's probably just the media drumming thing. But,
I think they got to tell themselves something. But if we put it all together and we look at really what we need to do to win. Horses had a presser this week, and there's a couple of key quotes, and we'll throw a few in now and through the next segment as well. But basically, no matter who we play, we like to play two-way footy. That's all of our midfielders. We go in with a plan, as we do every week. At the end of the day, it's about your collective, making sure you got players. Your players work for and with each other. There will be individual roles, but every player has a role at certain points of the game. We need to play strong, two-way footy, and that's what we'll be focused on. So,
end quote.
Yeah. So that's
bang on. I think what we're expecting, isn't it? That's our game style. Horse is not giving them a whole lot. He's effectively saying and probably telling the team the same thing. Simple messaging. Play hard, play your style, and play with each other. Look for each other around the ground. It's going to be a raucous freaking game, mate.
It's going to be hectic.
Well, let's just get into it. The tickets.
All right.
What happened?
Ticket madness. Okay. So obviously, chronologically, we went for the grand final ballot. We got that one all sorted. We got a big group of members. We go to every home game, so we had the right barcode. We had the priority. We're in there. We got those sorted, and then of course the next challenge was the preliminary final tickets, and then I was on the phone to the Swans guys. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but there was pretty strong indication before the Collingwood and Fremantle game that had started that most likely we would be able to purchase two tickets per one barcode, depending on the opposition.
So basically, I understood it, and I think we both said it a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week. It was supposedly 2 tickets per member for Collingwood and 4 tickets per member for the Dockers. That was the original wording and indication.
It was unconfirmed. So they were a bit ambiguous. They didn't want to. I think they probably knew at the time that it was 1 ticket per barcode, but they didn't want to disappoint anyone in advance. They wanted to, because it's the AFL driving this, right?
Yeah.
It's not the Swans. The AFL's taken over control of the finals, and they're deciding the allocation. I think
we know that because the SCG members have been absolutely shafted.
Yeah.
So we know that.
And the Swans members, really.
Absolutely,
So I think we've read different numbers on different social posts throughout the week, but obviously we're at a stadium that has less than half of what the MCG can hold. So we're working on a smaller scale, but when you potentially have 16,000 allotted each to the members of the clubs, then the rest depends on SCG Trust, and we're trusting that the SCG Trust are actually going to go for Sydney, because otherwise, worst case scenario is that we go to our home prelim and there's more Pies fans there.
How does it work with the MCG Trust? Did they get allocated some tickets, or are they part of the SCG Trust? How does it all work?
Well, we can talk about that now. I was hoping we, fingers crossed, get to the grand final and we could explain it. But basically, there's 7 different sections or sectors that they allot to, and basically the competing AFL clubs are allotted anywhere between 16,000 and 40,000, and I guess that's a total. So if you've got two clubs,
sorry,
that's 20
are
each.
these referencing the preliminary final, or are we talking?
No, this is the grand final. So
okay, sorry. But
grand final
in the preliminary final,
grand final they have documentation for. Prelim they don't.
Right. I guess that was my point. Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't know. I was under the impression, and someone gave me the impression that SCG and the MCG or MCC, whatever, have some kind of conjoined deal. So if you're part of the MCC, you're still active to be able to get Sydney Trust ones. I may be wrong. I hope I am.
I haven't heard that, but I mean, it's possible. But I mean, Steve-O has some MCC stuff that he's had since he was a kid, but I don't think he's got the same at the SCG. So
no, okay, there might not be it then.
It could be an option that you could get, but I haven't heard that. But what I have heard is 16,000 to each clubs, the members of the clubs, and then the rest is a mix of the SCG Trust and general admission.
Yeah,
and we're hoping
an AFL sponsorship.
Well, yeah, corporate obligations.
Corporate obligations. That's not AFL bullshit equals corporate obligations.
Yeah. So the point is we were hoping that we could, bring more of our friends and family who are, some might not be members like we are, but they're definitely involved in the Swans and Swans fans. So we were hoping to bring them along. But then when we found out it was one ticket per barcode, we had to, a lot of people missed out. And so, we're a bit, I was certainly very disappointed. I posted during the week saying exactly that. But obviously we were lucky enough to get tickets, so we have to be appreciative of that. And
we got 2 lines, so basically we effectively got 16 tickets altogether. Every one of us a member.
5, 8, 7, 5, just under,
yeah. And so we had to get them over 2 different lots. So we're sitting close to each other, but not far off. And a massive shout out to Swan superfan Sam, who in the 11th hour came up, cape and all, and he's just rocked up, managed to get logged in before either of us could, and then started buying those tickets for us.
Oh, man.
Big shout out for Sam. We were panicking.
Thank you, Sam. We were on the desktop, right? And we crashed out 3 times.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you were Sam was on the mobile or then you moved to the mobile, but
this is how hardcore we were. I think you had 2 computers going.
Yep.
I had 2 computers going via VPN.
Yeah.
Sam had a computer and a mobile phone or logging in.
Yeah.
Having said that, clearly we're part of the problem. But if they made the process simpler and just that we didn't have to stress so much, then I guess we arguably wouldn't have been so greedy with trying to take bandwidth from Ticketek.
Well, I mean, they also said they had a concert and other footy, and it's but that's your job. That's what
they do. They sell tickets, and they can't do that.
Ticketek. That's your.
Was it? I think David King said death taxes and Ticketek blowing up in September. It's standard stuff, right? And I mean, one thing that I found particularly nice was that there was tons of Swans fans that are obviously trying to get tickets, and they're local, and they're maybe not members, but they go to games and they're available, or they want to bring their partner, for instance, and they couldn't because, of course, they were stuck with the 1 ticket and can't get the second. And we found ourselves a lot of Swans members asking other members, or just putting in the general chat and through Twitter and Insta and on Facebook, and everyone's asking for tickets. Mate, there was tickets being passed around like joints at Woodstock. It was all cool, calm, and lovely. Everyone's just fanging them out. I had 4 in my possession, and we're passing them out to different people as people were asking through the channels. So it worked out really, really well. Obviously, a lot of Swans fans missed out, and I feel very bad about them. I'm really sorry that you did. We're just hoping that we get Red and White Army out there and just block out any black. So we're going to do what we can. It's got to be super loud, though. We have to be super loud. That Collingwood fan base is insane. We have to out-insane them somehow, some way or how.
You're stealing my one last thing, mate. All right, here we go. Ground size. So Fly McRae has blamed himself for not preparing his team to play on the vastly smaller SCG field in round 22. What a wonderful coach. Yeah, so they painted the SCG dimensions onto the Holden Centre Park so they could get it just right.
So if we understand this, Noddy, and you're going to go through the dimensions in a second. It's not that dissimilar.
No, I mean,
right? So please, there's not a story here, and I think your next quote sums it up perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, look, we keep a tab on the dimensions of the stadium. If for the podcast, if we ever need to reference it, we've got a tab that says stadiums there. We've got all the dimensions, and you go through it every year, and you go, yeah, it's there's not too much of it. I mean, the one that really sticks out is Cardinia. That is a truly weird. It's the outlier, and there was a fantastic ABC article today that went through all the different shapes and sizes from the amateur to the pro fields. And how over the last 10 or 20 years or something, there's just very little difference in how teams play and what effect that has on their win rate. But there was also some pretty cool quotes from an ex-Swan Brownlow medalist, Gerard Headley, who was probably the more enlightened of the old Codger Brigade, as I think you put. But no, I mean, nothing but respect for the great man. But I think he put it pretty succinctly and pretty plainly. He says, I think people continually make the mistake of believing the Swans ground is the same size as when he played there, which is a long time ago, right? He hears that a lot. And here are the numbers. 160 metres long by 141 metres wide is the MCG. 155 metres long by 136 metres wide is the SCG. So if you're standing in the middle of the ground, it's 2.5 metres longer to the goals and 2.5 metres skinnier to the wings. I don't see that as statistically relevant.
Bang.
What a great quote. He goes on to say, it's not an issue. The ground size is not an issue. It's almost exactly the same size as the Gabba, and yet we never hear about the Gabba. There's half a metre difference between the SCG and the Gabba. So
Gerald Healy just nailing it. Bang. There you go.
Out of the park.
Take that, Pies fans. It doesn't matter. Chris Murray on Twitter mentioned that he doubts the small difference in the ground size does not matter. But what may be important are the visual cues from the boundary fences to stands. They may be important aiming points. So that's a particularly interesting point in that you can replicating the size of the venue is not that important, but just understanding the general layout, what you're looking for, where you're standing in comparison to the general ground. Spatial awareness, I guess, is probably the most important part. And mapping out a fake pitch in your backyard or whatever the hell you decide to do, I don't think it's going to give you a whole lot of extra benefit.
I don't think so. I mean, the other point, and I mentioned that ABC article, the point is, and this is one of my ongoing bugbears. It just really pisses me off. The broadcast angle, and I've complained about it this year. The broadcast angle at the SCG is lower. It's physically stationed lower than the other grounds, especially the MCG. So what that means is it's at a lower point, so it's a closer view of the action, so it looks like the field is smaller, and that doesn't help. It effectively contributes to this myth and perception that the SCG is smaller.
Yeah, because at that angle, you're kind of lower to the ground. It kind of looks like the ground is kind of skinnier.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, but that's not the ground. It's just a perception of where
it doesn't give you the true sense of, when you're on the field, last time we were on the field was Buddy's 1,000th. And because we haven't had a kick since then, have we?
Well, I went to one at AFLW last week on Saturday.
Oh, look out. Okay, very cool. We'll get a quick update on that. The point is, that if we were further back, the broadcast, it would take in the large field, and you really shouldn't be able to tell just by naked eye, a 5 meter difference lengthwise and widthwise. I don't think most humans have that ability. But anyway, it is what it is. All right, mate, let's move on. The last talking point, I think, here is the mid-final break or mid-final series break, which we've had. And Steve-O has got a position on this. And I think
this is the break for winning the qualifying final. We get a week off, and then we play prelim.
Yeah. So everyone gets a week off between home and away and the beginning of the final series. But we're talking about the week off after winning the qualifying final and getting into the prelim.
Yep.
I'll pass over to you, mate.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll talk like Steve-O. The one thing I'm more concerned about is the impact of the pre-finals bye in seasons where the bye has been used since 2016, but not 2021, of course, COVID year. Teams that have won the qualifying final and then had 2-3 weeks off prior to the prelim have only made the grand final 40% of the time. Going back to 2000, when the current final system started, there's been no pre-finals bye. The winning qualifying teams made the GF 85% of the time. I even noticed myself that I've kind of already switched off from the season with only one Swans game in just under a month. So
Steve-O. So
Steve-O,
dedicated,
looking at these numbers,
so fickle. He must have a lot going on on up there in Finland. But he raises a good point, and so I guess that's the challenge of the team and the squad and the coaches to keep everyone on task. And I've got a few more Horse quotes here to follow that up. So Horse, when asked about, how the players handling the time out, are they on track? Horse says, we've had a tough training session in warm conditions on Saturday. We trained last week on Thursday, so it's good to be able to have that under our belt. It's always a balancing act between making sure your players don't get injured and a really tough session, so we wanted to have a good session, and that's what we did. The players had a really good blowout, pulled up well, and that's all you can do. Prepare as best as you can, and we felt the weekend session was an important one for us. So, yeah, I guess we'll know. Saturday night.
It is a bit disappointing not to have more football, and I'm not a particularly big fan of the breaks. But look, does it do us any favors? I guess. Get an extra week off the legs for some of the boys. I mean, there's no doubt they would have trained pretty hard this weekend just to kind of get a bit of make sure the fitness is up and running. But you lose fitness pretty quickly. But I think it's not so much the fitness for our lads, because I think they're pretty well drilled there. It's almost like the speed of the game. Watching Collingwood playing 3 intense games in a row, 2 intense games in a row, with this one being the third. They do have a bit of advantage in just being able to have their eye in, I guess. Whereas our lads, they might come up a bit slow initially, and I'm sure Horse is beating them up to make sure that they come out firing and controlling the game right off the bat. So, it's one of those nuances.
Jules in the text today or yesterday, I think it was probably today, she pointed out that in that, we were, much was made of our slow starts, especially early in the year before the bye, where we were the worst first quarter team in the first half of the year, and then we ended up being the best fourth quarter team in the second half of the year, or whatever it was. So obviously we've got one chance this Saturday, and we need to really come out from the beginning, fully switched on. And I think she made that point with us, and I think it's one that is in the front of the minds of a lot of Swans fans, or in the back, depending on how optimistic you are. But it's going to be challenging, that's for sure.
It's going to be tough.
Mate, I think, do you want to give us a very quick AFLW update? You mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. Look, GWS played the Sydney Swans at the SCG, so the inaugural match between those two sides. GWS, of course, being in the competition from the beginning, and the Swans having the first year. Giants won by 47 in a pretty convincing win. Just kept the pressure in the centre and just kept getting it out forward for a whole lot more. We had a pretty good defensive unit in attempting to kind of keep that controlled, but they eventually got overrun. So it was it was an entertaining game, good turnout, pretty decent weather, apart from just out of nowhere a shock, what felt like hail for no reason in the middle of it all. But we had a couple of nice stand-up players. The two Hamiltons, Alexia and Cynthia, they're incredible. Like they're really, really, really fantastic players. I'm looking forward to them turning it on again. On our side, and on the Giants side, Madison Brazendale, I was really impressed with her. 18 touches, 12 kicks, 4 tackles, just really strong effort by her.
And a very cool name to boot.
Yeah, for sure. And she was really fantastic. Seemed like the most kind of organized player of the lot of them. It was pretty tidy. It was a really great game, and I had a kick to kick afterwards, which was fantastic. We got our kick to kick going, and then what my favorite part about that was I took my mum with me, and we were walking around, and to see all these kids kicking the ball and kick to kick in the middle of the SCG with their mothers, which is a different scene than what you typically would see, was particularly special. And I had my mum's eyes kind of glowing out of herself. So I think it was a really, really fun time.
Oh, that's nice. Well, all right, mate. That's well, hopefully, all this is going to be experience for them, and they had close first game, sort of bit tougher second game, and obviously third game against the more experienced Giants, bit of an eye-opening. I think they played in the Mangrook our original
It was, yeah.
Adam Good's mother's designed jersey,
That's
and
right.
so pretty cool outfits. Their outfits and Guernseys and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a big learning curve this year, and it's as much for them as it is for the club and the fans. So it's a two-way street. But obviously, wish the ladies all the best, and look forward to next week. Well, I guess are they? Do you know if they're playing this weekend, mate, or is there a?
Oh, I don't actually know. I've obviously got my eyes and my heart set on what the next week's going to be.
Yep,
that's right. But we do. If we have a quick look, yeah, we've got Saturday at 11:00. No, that's not true. Saturday at 1:00 away at Port Adelaide.
Yep.
For the Swannies. So, yeah, maybe got a pre-gamer right there. That doesn't sound too terrible.
That'll be on a TV somewhere, I hope. But
yeah.
All right, mate. Well, we're getting on in the time department here in this episode, so I'm gonna talk about one last thing here to wrap up, and this is a general call to arms for all our Bloods brethren. I want everyone who is going to the game, and even those who aren't, going to the pubs in and around Sydney and around Australia. If you're supporting the Swans, I want you to make a promise that you will cheer as loud and as often as you can. We need to do absolutely everything we can do to nullify the noise of those reported 16,000 odd Pies fans that will be there, because honestly, their 16,000 is going to sound more like 32,000. So, our hopeful majority, because it is a home game apparently. Hopefully we've got a majority of fans and supporters, and we can turn it on and sound double the amount that we have, so we can drown out their what do you call
noise?
Belligerence. Yeah, that's it, mate. Thanks, mate. But we really need to take their influence out of the game, because they can really get going and they can really sway outcomes. And as we know, there's moments in games that can change the course of the game, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can as supporters to bring home the boys. So
and you've got a good quote from Horse here, right? So
yep.
Horse, on the whole point of the crowd and everything, he said, quote, "I just keep telling them to focus on what works and understanding their role in the team, that any particular moment is important and putting pressure on the opposition is important. Just concentrating on the things you can control and focus on that," end quote.
So what we as supporters can control and focus on is putting pressure on the opposition and the opposition supporters through persistent and dedicated screaming.
Yeah. Thank you, Horse. We will do exactly that.
We'll follow your orders. All right. Well, mate, that's it. We got the prelim this weekend. We're all pumped. Man, it's going to be nervous. We're waiting for teams on Thursday, but that brings us to the end of this episode. So on behalf of the Bevy, I'd like to say thank you to all you Cygnets and Swanlings out there for listening in. Make sure to keep following us on Instagram and Facebook at A Bevy of Bloods for various content updates and announcements. Until then, up the Bloods, and can you Swannies?